Welcome to the Phenomenal Teacher Show. Our guest today is Maya Krasna, who is a Conscious Uncoupling Expert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello.
I'd like to start off by asking, who was your favorite teacher growing up and what made them special to you?
I was very lucky. I had a few teachers when I was growing up, which I connected. I think my favorite one was actually at my high school, and she was I felt like she was always just there. So it wasn't necessarily about what she was teaching me, but the way she showed up for me or for us as a class was always just the best part of her presence and of her teaching. And I still think about her, just the way she conducted herself. So I think that was my best teaching.
Yeah, I could definitely see how she could have had an impact on you all these years. So tell us the process of how you became interested in helping people separating and divorcing and sort of counseling them along the way.
I think there is no specific starting point in this process when it just suddenly came to me. But for many years when I was studying kinesiology and counseling, and I was just watching how people are dealing with the struggles in their life. And of course, then, I got married, and I had to sort out some problems in my own marriage. And in recent years, I became really interested in grief ceremonies. So I'm also studying rituals and ceremonies. So this is my main work. And I really could see that people need support when they are going through a process of grief. I'm not divorced myself. I mean, I had a pretty hard breakup previously. And I do have lots of friends who were going or are going through divorce. And I think somewhere in there, this idea was born when we just start supporting each other, first just as a friends. And then it just grew into this bigger piece when I recognized that this is a rite of passage and it really should be marked in a very significant way.
So let's talk about the grieving process. So we know that when you separate, especially a long-term marriage, and sometimes even short-term, meaning you just are so disappointed that it didn't work out. What are some things that a teacher could do to sort of make peace with what is happening around her as the relationship has ended?
So to make peace, which is one of the prime things, as you recognize, to what we're trying to do. The main teachings what I got from my teachers during this work is to concentrate on a gratitude. And I feel like we heard this so many times, and this is really something what is actually rippling through our world when we are saying like, oh, we just need to give gratitude. So in my own practice, I found that the gratitude is actually the key. And this is where I would always start with anybody who I'm counseling through the process. And this can just start in a really simple ways. So one of the ways, or one of the really small tools, and yet very powerful tools I found, is to give gratitude every day when we wake up and we just drink the first glass of water. And with that water, I always give gratitude, either for life or for whatever is happening, or I just basically need to find something what I'm grateful for. And practicing this day by day makes a really big difference to my life. And when I talk to other people who are practicing the same thing, just make difference in a long term to their lives too.
So what if someone is having a hard time to be grateful in this situation? Meaning, now we're going to have to worry about finances, about if they have like some kind of investment in the house, that they have to sell the house, they have to split up all of their ownership, all of their assets, and then if there's children involved, and who stays with who, the visitation rights. So beyond financing, kids' involvement, and you're thinking to yourself, how could I find anything to be grateful right now? Especially how the relationship ended. So let's say that maybe it was unfaithfulness that caused it, or most of the time, I would like to say that it's not necessarily mutual. From my experience working, or talking with people that have divorced, it's usually driven by one spouse, meaning the other one didn't really want to get divorced, but then that one was persistent and wanted to separate. And that's how it always started. So can you give us some suggestions of how to find gratefulness if they feel like there's really not that much to be grateful for because of the circumstance they're in?
Yeah, you are completely spot on in that way, in that process, how it often happens. And I guess this is exactly the challenge, that we do have to still do that work with the gratitude. So when you are in the middle of this completely potential breakdown, and as you said, like there's finances going on, there's children, people are actually, arguing, this is the toughest time to find the gratitude, exactly. But it is one of the first steps to take towards that resolution. And so I'm not saying that if you are in the middle of that battle for the house, that you are giving gratitude for whatever is happening right now. Those are exactly the moments when we are looking for gratitude. What else is there in my life to find the gratitude for? And sometimes it could be just as little as like, oh, thank God it's a sunny day because this still brings the joy to my heart. It could be very, very small steps. And that's the point, of we actually, in those points of very, very high stress, we are just taking small steps out. So there is no great giant leap, I just do this and suddenly everything is perfect. It just doesn't work that way. I tried it and I don't know how about everybody else, but it doesn't work for me. So, but it is that just putting one foot in front of the other, which makes the thing. And so the gratitude is usually the start of the way out. And it doesn't need to be for whatever is happening. I mean, ideally, later on when you do practice the gratitude, it's kind of like any other practice. You don't just go and run marathon, at the beginning. You just start walking or you start doing small runs. It's just like everything else is practicing gratitude. So you doing this in a small ways, being grateful for the sun, being grateful for your children are with you today, being grateful that they are healthy, that for everything you have good in your life still, then you just really bring that up and just shine the light on the positive stuff in your life.
I would love for you to share with us a ritual or ceremony, because I know that's something that you're very interested in, and I'm very curious about it.
Mm-hmm. So I like to use one example, which is again actually about a gratitude. So this is a little ritual of gratitude. I work with gratitude a lot, obviously, before we go into the deep grieving ceremonies, which are then very different. So I'll just give you a little example of a ritual which anybody can do. And I suggest people that they do their ceremonies outdoors, somewhere in the nature, because the nature is usually a great teacher and a great healer, by herself. So one of my clients, when I suggested that she does the ritual, and in a way she actually invented this ritual, but it just works so well. So she went outside and she started gathering leaves. After we spoke about gratitude, and she was saying I don't have actually any gratitude in my heart right now, because she was just so upset with her partner. But she's like, okay, I'm going to give this a go. And so she just got us leave. And then she's like, actually, what was good in my marriage was, the way he was treating me on Sunday morning, because he always just used to bring her breakfast, and it was very sweet. And then she just picks up another leaf and is like, actually, this represents what was good in my marriage. And so she just goes and gathers leaves which are all representing the good things which were happening in a marriage. So for that moment, she was able to put down whatever was not working or was upsetting her at that moment, which is a hard thing to do. And so she was just really picking up all of those things, all of those leaves, which each represented a positive thing in her life. And when she had a big bundle, she said, like, I was actually so surprised to see how big the bundle is, because all she was feeling at that time was just the upset and the betrayal and everything that was going on with that. So she had this big bundle suddenly. And that was already great. But then she went to a little creek, because she was out in the nature, and she managed to throw all of those leaves out into the creek and just watch them flow away. And that actually released something in her on a more unconscious level. And she was able to breathe out, and I was like, okay, actually this was, and now I'm ready to face the harder parts of what actually still is going on, And don't take me wrong, it's like these little rituals, and you can just make your own, potentially on a daily basis. They're not going to suddenly resolve everything, but they are unraveling on a very deep level of that hurt. And so what the ritual is for is very different than when we are just doing counseling and processing stuff on a very conscious level. So with the ritual, we are trying to process things on a deeper unconscious or soul levels. And so by enacting certain things, we are actually signaling to our body, you can let go and we can move on. And this is a process, obviously.
Now, let's say that you do not have a stream nearby or water. Would you advise someone to pick up the leaves and burn them, or is that for a different ritual that you're releasing it into the air? I mean, what can people do once they acquired this bundle of leaves? What should they do with it if there isn't a water stream to release it?
Yeah. I mean, so we usually try to work with different elements. So water is one of them. Air is one of them. So actually even releasing them in a wind makes a really big difference. And fire is definitely my strong ally, where I usually go to. And so the big grieving ceremonies are always, for me, with fire and doing like fire ceremonies. So yes, definitely you can burn them. And if you don't have access to leaves, you can also just write things down on a piece of paper and then still like release them into the fire.
Yes, I definitely do that when I write something I wanted to manifest and I put a date on it and it hasn't. And I feel so disappointed. So I like rip it out and I crinkle it and I throw it in the fire and I said, I release you. And I know that you did not come to being into my world because either it was not just meant to be for me, for my highest good. So I just let it go. And I don't even think about it anymore. Like once I see it burning up, I'm like, I'm free of you. From the expectation that I placed on you into my life, I release that. So I love using fire in that way too.
Hey friend, if you're enjoying this episode, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share this with a fellow teaching friend. Now back to the show.
I would like us to dive deeper into the differentiation between conscious uncoupling and unconscious uncoupling. What is the difference?
So the main difference for me is the way we are going through this process. When we are uncoupling or divorcing or separating, in some way we are always doing it consciously because we are aware of our environment and we are aware that we are going through the separation. So, but what we then refer to in the terms of conscious uncoupling is, as I said, the way we do the process. So in this way, rather than just slamming the door behind us and saying like, I'm out of here, which, and not necessarily sometimes having wine or without explanations, which is then I would more point towards that's the unconscious uncoupling. So with the conscious uncoupling, people are recognizing what is going on, and they choose to live in in a actually very respectful way still towards their partner. So when I refer to conscious uncoupling, we often see it like when people are kind of separating well, when there's like two people are going like, okay, actually this didn't work out for us, so let's just move on. It still doesn't always work that way, right? So even if the one person leaves, it doesn't mean that suddenly there's the unconscious uncoupling, and then it's all wrong. Like sometimes we just need to leave. Yeah, if a person is in a situation of domestic violence, let's say, and then she just decides like, actually what I need to do is pick up my children and leave. And she's really aware of this step. And she's not necessarily, in this deep fear, but she's aware, she's like, this is what's happening in my life. This doesn't serve me. These are my boundaries and I'm leaving. And she's doing it very consciously and in a very present way. And this is a very positive thing. So I would say when we do the very conscious uncoupling is we are recognizing the patterns that no longer serve us, and we are leaving those patterns. We're not only leaving the partner, but hopefully we are recognizing this is the part which didn't work for me in here. And so we are having boundaries which we then choose to follow up on. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Because it's often a self-reflection process of what did I do in this relationship, instead of always blaming the other person for not meeting your expectations, or you had an idea of what a husband should be and maybe he did not meet that. And so you're angry with him or upset of how everything unraveled in your life together as partners. So I could definitely see about holding yourself accountable and seeing, what can I learn from this experience? Let's say that a teacher has recently separated from her partner and she's starting anew. She's starting to build her life all over again, but her confidence is shattered, meaning she has not been in this dating field for a really long time and is afraid to maybe get hurt again or to get let down from a relationship, doesn't really know what to do in that stage. What can she do in order to build up her confidence to know that, there is love out there for her, and what can you advise her to find to take the next leap, the next step?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So in this situation, and I see people do that, quite a bit. Like we are suddenly, or they are suddenly single, and then how do we move on until we find somebody else again? Because there is potentially somebody there for us. I would advise as a first step is still to hold a grieving ceremony. Why I would suggest that is because when we separate, even if it's in the past, and it could be like a few years past, it could be still, once I actually did a process with someone who needed to let go of somebody who was in a primary school, so they've been, and her first boyfriend kind of left her, and she still carried, late in her 40s, so much trauma actually from there, and she was still dreaming about this person. And so what we actually needed to do was to actually process this part. So what I'm saying, when we do need to do a grieving ceremony, it actually doesn't matter how long ago the relationship has ended, because we just carry that trauma. And what I hear from people when they are ready to start dating somebody else, is because they are potentially free of those old patterns or of all those traumas, and they can trust again. And so if you can't trust, it's hard to form new relationships. And the trust is often shattered sometimes in those past relationships. And to do this, I would do the ceremony of letting go of those old relationships, or doing the specific grieving ceremony if you're aware of which relationship is not happening. And then to stay, and then to kind of be clear, so then you can move on. Also with women, what I observe, there's a little bit more than just a relationship what we need to let go. Like so when I was doing a ceremony, just to use like specific example, what came up once for me when I needed to let go over the different steps was, for example, my beauty, because I was just aware of my aging process. And as a women, it's like, well, we shouldn't be too attached to our beauty, and yet when we see it the way it's going, and suddenly we are not in our 20s, we actually do carry a deep grief for that. And that also brings less self-confidence in us. We do our best to be okay with this, but it's hard. And so one of the parts in the grieving ceremony, and this is exactly what I would use a fire for, and burn these kind of things, letting go of these things, is also like, well, what did I already put on an altar of life until now? And then I can just release it and put it into the ashes, so I can be reborn like a phoenix and move into a different stage of my life.
Now, when a person goes through this grieving ritual, does it depend on how long that process is on the person? Or do you think that a person, once they're decided that I'm moving on from this, that it would be like a short time span of, you're grieving the loss, and then you're like, and now I just let it go. Is that possible, or does it sort of linger on, and then you have to keep addressing different aspects of releasing, any trauma that you might have had?
The rituals they are different from kind of depending on, on the length of your relationship or how deep you went into that relationship. But as soon as you decide that you are doing something about this, you are already kind of in the ritual. The same way, as soon as you decide you're going for counseling, things start shifting for you, and it's the same with the ceremony. So it doesn't necessarily matter how long is the ritual, but what is really important, once you make a decision and you commit to something, to actually stay with it. So if you decide like this ritual is going to take me 10 minutes, that's absolutely fine, but then do your 10 minutes. When we do a grieving fire ceremony and we do it overnight, so we start at a sunset and then we stop at a sunrise, then it's definitely advisable just to follow up with it all night. So with rituals, you are creating a specific container. You are making a commitment that this is what is going to take place. And in some ways, if you do make your own ritual, it doesn't matter necessarily what you do, and you can write all of those things down and just burn them, or you can just pray, or you can offer herbs to your fire. Like that's absolutely fine. But once you set a time, you stick with the time. So if it's 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes. If it's 3 hours, do 3 hours. If it's overnight, then do overnight. And then you just need to assess after the ritual, well, did I release as much? Did actually things change for me? And sometimes it is pretty instant. So some people can just really do it. They just decide to let go. And as you said previously, suddenly you just go and you just feel so much lighter. It does happen. With deeper grief, or I have a tendency to call it grief, with deeper trauma or betrayal, it often takes a little bit longer. And also after the ritual, we just need to see what has changed, because the change is not just instant like that. So it might take still a week or two until you see what has shifted, and then you might have to do it again, because then you will be going onto the deeper level or releasing different trauma or different patterns. So it's really, really individual what's going to happen for you.
What if you're ready to release and you're going through these ceremonies and rituals and you're like, I feel really good about this decision now that it happened. What if your partner isn't so, like, what if your partner is angry about the separation? Or what if your partner is not in the same mindset? He's not interested in your rituals or ceremonies. He's not interested in doing any releasing process. So how can I know that we could only be in control of our own emotions. Like, we cannot control someone else's behavior or emotions. So how could we actually help release him, even though he's not doing any rituals or process, but just help him along the way too, like your partner along the way of letting go, just like you're going through this process of letting go.
Mm-hmm. So by my understanding, when we are partnered with somebody, we kind of create this connection, which I would almost describe, it's like a rope coming from one person to another. And when we are separating, we also need to kind of disconnect that rope. And sometimes the partners, either they want to do the ritual or they don't connect with this idea at all. And there's, in a way, nothing we can do about it. We can't force them to say, no, we just have to sit together through this ritual if they are really not into it. So it is actually still your work to work on it and just to release it the best you can. It's always easier, yes, with two people actually doing it together. But often it's actually not possible. So you just take responsibility for your part and you just unraveling. And when that rope is kind of thinner or you disconnect, the partner still kind of shifts, because then you are not doing the dance together, right? So you're not pulling onto each other's strings. And which is easier said than done. When we do rituals, it is quite often without the partner. I usually suggest to people that they do this with their friends and family, actually still to be supported in this process when they can. Because there is enormous power when people are witnessed. So like when we do marriage, and we always have witnesses, because it has a very different energy or power behind it when people are seeing that we are committing to each other. And the same happens when people are then separating. Then even if you are not there with your partner, you have witnesses when you officially state, this is enough. I choose to move on, and this is what I'm letting go of. And please do hold me accountable. You can ask your friends and family, like, if you see me doing this, just please help me out. Because it's a difficult process. And when we are especially if we are in a betrayal or in the deep heartache, it's really hard to make those like good decisions and just to be all empowered about it and be great. It's hard work, and we are in a hard place, and we really need that support of the family and friends. So when you do have the moment of clarity, you just need to tell them, this is what I need from you, potentially. And sometimes we're not even able to say that. So then you can do something on your own. But as I said, like step by step, we do whatever we can. And when we come to that point, sometimes with couples, and this can take a few years, then I love to perform the positive divorce ceremony when people are actually saying, like, yes, we are going our separate way. But to do that, usually it takes lots of work on both sides. of the partners, and when they both do their work, then they're actually more willing to do that.
As we come to an end of this show, I would like to ask you, what is one thing a teacher can do today to feel better if she has recently divorced?
That's a big question. Enjoy whatever is possible to enjoy in her life right now.
Well, thank you, Maya, so much for this conversation. I'm sure that our phenomenal teachers have benefited from our conversation today. How can people find out more about you?
Thank you for asking. Well, they can find me on Facebook on a divorce celebrant. It's probably the easiest way. I've got a website called endings .oneuniverse.com. Yeah, I think Facebook is the best way.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.